Hey there, darlings. Welcome to Roots and Refuge Farm. My name is Jess, and if you're new here, I'm so glad you're here. And if you're not new here, welcome back. I'm also very glad that you're here for the third installment of my 2025 garden tour season. So it's actually been 2 weeks since the last episode of the garden tours. We had a whole lot of rain, and I decided to just work in the garden instead of showing it off. And at this point, I would say it's definitely reflecting 2 weeks of a lot of rain and a lot of work. So if you've never seen these videos before, I'm gardening in the Midlands of South Carolina, zone 7B, 8A, somewhere kind of in the middle of those two. I do grow organically and have quite a lot of space. Here on our farm, we grow the majority of what we eat, and I post regular videos throughout the growing season here to invite you guys into my garden. So please make sure that you're subscribed so you can catch these. Are going to be regular throughout the season. And I think it really helps to see how plants grow, to hear someone else's experience with them. But also, isn't it nice to just have the camaraderie of being able to walk through a garden with someone? I've been thrilled in recent years how much more popular gardening has become, especially among like younger generations. But for all the years that I've been growing, I have lamented, not necessarily having a neighbor or someone close by that I could just walk through their garden and learn a lot of things. So this is me lending that to you. Let's go take a look. So there's a lot going on out here, and it's getting to that point of being like incredibly wonderful, but also just a touch of a mess. And the truth is, my garden may just be a little bit of a mess this year. We're finding our rhythm and what this is going to look like. We've actually downsized our farm a lot, downsized our garden. And this year, my focus has been to grow more for seasonal eating rather than growing large amounts of like similar things in order to preserve and can. And it's just a little bit of a different year, but I'm loving it. All right, so first stop here at the tomatoes. You may see some of these are a little bushier than I normally do. I normally prune more aggressively than this. And the ones I planted later, I am still pruning aggressively. But these first early ones were some plants I bought at a local store and put in. And I actually have pruned them probably about a third to a half of what I normally do. I've left some more branches because they just got really big fast. And I thought, we'll try it. We'll see what happens. The worst case scenario here is that I'll end up having to pull some plants early. I will end up pruning a little bit more, just what's down here by the ground. But right now they're setting a lot of fruit, and I'm going to let them keep more branches than I normally allow. I'd say we're probably about another month to a month and a half at least on harvesting mini ripe tomatoes off of these. I could be wrong on that. So when you're growing tomatoes for the first time, you'll watch them and then you'll see you have green fruit set. You'll get so excited and you'll just check them every single day. And after about 3 weeks of watching that green fruit, as it's gotten bigger and bigger, and then it kind of stops growing in size and then it just stays green. And it will just drive you absolutely crazy. Just a heads up for those of you who are new, it can take up to a month for green fruit to actually start turning colors, but the day that you come out and you see the slightest blush on your tomatoes, which is the slightest turn of color, that is actually the big tipping point. So there's a gas that they start producing at that point that once it is in production, they're going to keep ripening. And actually, if you take the tomatoes off, once they've blushed and you bring them in the house, they will actually continue to ripen in the house. Now, I prefer to let them ripen on the vine as much as possible. Sometimes that's not feasible because there's a heavy rain coming and you may want to get them off before the rain comes and causes them to split. Or if you're dealing with a heavy pest pressure, you may want to take them in so pests don't get to them before you do. The reason why grocery store tomatoes taste like disappointment is that oftentimes they're picked when they're completely green, before they've even begun blushing. Therefore, they're not producing that gas that produces a lot of the flavor that the tomato ends up having. Now, that said, let's say you have like a big green fruit that you accidentally break off. Man, I'd take that baby inside and slice it up and fry it. Fried green tomatoes are where it's at, and all they are is just an unripe tomato that is fried. All right, let's come around here. This is one area where the tomato thing may become an issue just because they're a little thick on here, but I'm watching it closely. I'm out here daily looking and seeing how much can I get away with letting these grow. Right here I've got borage, and it looks like it's getting ready to open. Borage has like kind of prickly They feel kind of fuzzy, almost leaves and flowers. And these are going to open into like beautiful little blue star-shaped flowers that they're edible, and they taste kind of like a cucumber. They're not something that I'm like, ooh, I just want to eat all the borage flowers, but they're cute to freeze into ice cubes. Just, you know, if you're having a little party or something. Here are my Japanese cucumbers, and I'm just kind of steadily keeping an eye on them, making sure that all the branches are heading upwards. And I have not seen any actual fruit set yet. We've got some flowers down here, and that's a female flower right there that has the fruit behind it. So that will probably start producing soon. Once your cucumbers do start producing, you need to check them very regularly because the fruit grows really fast. Over on this side, I actually have a melon that I planted, and then I forgot that that's what I planted there, and then I ended up sticking some more cucumber seeds in. And the leaves of cucumbers and melons do look very similar. There are some differences. Melons typically have more rounded leaves, so I'm pretty sure this is the melon. That right there may be the cucumber, because you see the point on the end. I'm not sure. We'll see. I've got a few plants at the bottom of this, and they're also setting flowers and getting close to producing, so the mystery will be solved before long. So I planted all these tiny basil plants this year. They were just the smallest little sprouts that I had, and they've taken off. When you've got a basil plant growing, good sized plants, probably 14-15 inches tall, and it starts kind of getting some taller branches. And what you really want to make sure you do to get the most growth out of your basil is you want to, you know, we say prune it. It's really just harvesting it. And what I usually do is I'll come out and just go through all my basil, prune a bunch of it, and then go in and make tea with it. Or, you know, you can dry it or whatever. Even if you just pluck them off and throw them on the ground and feed the soil with them, pluck them off. This is how basil stems grow here. You'll have a split in the plant, and then in the armpit of that split you'll get a new stem. And you always want to pluck right at the top of that split. And by doing this continuously throughout the season, you will end up with much bushier plants and growth that lasts a lot longer. Especially if you live in a place that is warm, basil will go to seed pretty quickly. Now, plucking it like this is going to keep it from going to seed. Once it goes to seed, not all of them, some like Thai basil and holy basil, those pretty much go straight to seed, and we let them. It's part of like the flavor profile we expect. But for like Genovese sweet basil like this, it does change the flavor for it to start producing its seeds. So heavy pruning like this is going to give you so much more harvest. So literally, even if you don't want to like take this in and do something with it, pluck it off and throw it on the ground. It's mulching, it's feeding your soil. It's not bad, and it means that next week and 2 weeks from now and 3 weeks from now, when you want basil to do something with, you'll have it rather than having a massive plant that's gone to seed. The bees would love that, but if you want to enjoy your basil, make sure you're pruning it. Down here, more big growth on my cucumbers. I had such a slow start this year on the cucumbers thanks to the roly-polies. I would have liked for these to be producing by now. I mean, we're close, but unfortunately, the cucumber window is one that's limited here. I have a really long growing season, so I don't have a lot of like closing windows. It's like, oh no, I haven't planted my peppers yet. That's so bad. I won't get them. It doesn't matter. I just planted a bunch of peppers out now in the middle of May, even though my last frost was a month and a half ago. I've got a super long growing season. Those peppers have plenty of time to grow and produce me lots of food. But the windows that I have to worry about closing is not that I'm not going to have enough time before it freezes again. It's that the heat is going to come. In South Carolina, we start averaging in the mid to upper 90s by about June-ish. 90s is, mid to upper 90s Fahrenheit is like 34, 36 Celsius. And then into July and August, it's very common to exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit here, 38 Celsius. And it's very humid, and the garden really struggles with that heat. Things like cucumbers, they get really bitter when it's very hot. All the brassicas, all that stuff is very short-lived. A lot of my root vegetables, I grow those in the fall, winter, and early spring exclusively. I don't try to grow any of those through the summer. So my closing window is the like tolerable temperatures as far as heat goes. And I wish these cucumbers were further along at this point, because by like mid-June, maybe late June, I mean, there's always a gamble with the weather, you know, we may have an unseasonably cool June and it may be completely fine. There is a good likelihood that I won't get a ton of great cucumbers when I'm this late getting started. More tomatoes here, coming up, looking good, everything's looking really healthy. I remember when I showed you my okra bed that was just constantly coming up. I started yesterday to thin these out a little bit and pull out the big ones, and I mean there's still 100 small ones underneath. This happened because we just chopped down the okra and left what was on it, and I don't recommend it, but it's fine. I will at some point, I hope to get to it this week, just come in and clip out all of the excess, so that all that's left here is probably about 8-10 okra plants, something like that, and at that point they'll really start taking off. But goodness, what a mess. Here I have more of the okra mulch aftermath, and I will just pull this up. And that's so crazy. Like, this is food, but it obviously wouldn't produce much food if I let it all grow like this. Here I have some volunteer amaranth. I believe this is going to be the dreadlocks variety, because I've grown it here in the past, and that's probably why it's coming back. But I was very excited to see that. I love amaranth. It gets quite pest riddled here. The leaves do. You can't eat amaranth leaves. I typically just grow it because it's beautiful. I end up putting it in flower arrangements. And the long seed heads, the chickens really love them. Once they start developing their seeds, I'll throw them out to them. But it's just such a stunner. I mean, this thing will get like 5 feet tall. It'll have these long strands of red clumps of seeds. It's so beautiful. And I actually kind of like growing it as a trap crop. I'm not upset about the leaves getting eaten. But if the insects are eating these, they're leaving the other stuff alone. And I like that. The sunflowers, man, they just completely took off. This is a bunch of volunteer sunflowers, multi-headed. See there, they're starting to bloom. I let this handful go in this section. I pulled all the rest up, but these just volunteered because I grew sunflowers here last year and they dropped the seeds, and that's beautiful. Over here, look at this. 6 weeks ago I planted out some beets, and this is one of the places where the roly-poly's really bad, so like literally this was the only seedling that survived it. But check that out. One big lovely beet with fresh lovely greens ready to be used. And if you needed evidence that seeds want to grow, here are some more sunflowers coming up from the gravel between the edge of the garden bed. Tenacious little things. On these two trellises I have this melon called Snow Leopard, and again it's just going very wild right now. Every single day, sometimes twice a day, I have to come out and redirect all of the runners because they're literally growing inches every day. And I pretty much just turn them in kind of on themselves. I don't really mind if it's a mess. Once they start grabbing hold, they'll go up and you don't have to worry about it as much. But on the beginning of training anything to grow vertically, they have these little trellis grabbers. That's what I call them. You can see here where one has found its way and wrapped around its own stem. These will grab hold. These will grab hold of the trellis. Sometimes I'll take them and wrap them around to kind of give it a head start. Once they get some sense of it, they'll wrap around it. And once they really start that, you know, the most you'll have to do is find the few little runners that come out. And sometimes I'll let them. I personally think it's really beautiful whenever you've got like a melon or a squash or something going up the trellis and it's like reaching all the way to the top, but then on the side it's kind of spilling over. The only thing is you lose this part of the bed when you do that. So it can be beautiful if you want to. And you can cut parts of the plant off. You can try to redirect as much as you can, you know, easily. But if you've got parts that absolutely will not go up, you can cut parts of the plant off. But obviously, allowing it to have more runners and produce more flowers is ultimately going to produce more fruit. And this is not setting much yet, but I do see some little baby melons with dried up flowers on them. So this should start ripening and filling out here soon. Another example of sunflowers that have just leapt in growth. Got these beautiful, these are pro-cut sunflowers, and it looks like some of them are really close to opening. Another thing I've noticed this week is that a lot of my green stalk strawberries have started setting off their runners. And one thing I'll do when that's happening, and basically runners are how strawberry plants spread, and they send these out, and these little new growth areas will actually root into the ground if these were being grown in the ground. In a container, obviously there's nothing for them to root into, so if you don't do anything, they'll end up just drying up and dying off. So you can do one of two things. If you're wanting to spread them in the container that they're growing in, just redirect these and nestle them down kind of just barely into the soil. You don't have to bury them, but just set them where they're not going to pop up out of there. So it's sitting on the soil, they'll root in there. Once they're very well rooted, you just cut this little stem and separate them, and you have a new plant. Another thing I've done when I'm trying to like collect the runners out of like a green stalk is I'll get cups or pots, put soil in them, and I'll just kind of like set these somewhere where it's not going to impede another plant. You know, if I have an empty spot, I just easily stick it in there, and then just put this down into it, and obviously with soil, until that roots, and then you can cut it off. You know, sometimes I have to like nestle it in with a plant if it's really full, but you can do it just like this. Wedge it in there, let the runner root, and once it's rooted, cut it off and separate it, and then you can go plant your new plant. Oh, here's a really good example of rain versus no rain. Now these are different varieties, so that I'm sure does go factor in a little bit. This is a sweet potato vine that is in this pot under the pavilion. This is a sweet potato vine that is out getting the fullness of the rain that we just had. I planted those the same exact size at the same exact on the same day, these two, and truly that is the marked difference between plants that are getting a lot of rain versus ones that are not. Over the years of sharing garden tours, I've had some very funny comments of people watching and being like, this girl's garden is growing so much faster than mine. There's no way she's not putting Miracle-Gro. I don't believe that you're gardening organically. And they'll say all these different things. And I live in a place that rains 65 inches a year on average, at least, maintains like 60% plus humidity daily, and stays very warm. Those growing conditions are, I mean, there's like steroids for plants. I mean, and they grow super fast and lush. Now, it comes with the cost of dealing with a lot of disease, because those are also the conditions for fungal disease and bacterial disease and stuff like that in your plants to take off too. So it doesn't come without a cost. But yes, the garden does grow really, really fast. And I've had a few comments even recently being like, why is this so different? Why is your garden growing so much faster? I do not understand. And it really is those growing conditions. But we lived in Arkansas previous to this. I don't know, in Arkansas it would get, I think, hotter. And though I think there was more rain yearly in Arkansas, the summers were drier in my experience. And I've only lived here for 4 years, so that's a small comparison. But yeah, it's just, it rains more frequently here, but just maybe not as deeply. And this has been a particularly wet spring too, and it just blows the garden up. I think my garden grows faster here than it did in Arkansas, but it's hard to say. Maybe I need to go watch some old garden tours from there. Obviously soil matters quite a whole lot too, and having just any sort of imbalance in your soil can cause some stunting, and I'll even notice it sometimes between garden beds here. One thing that has happened this week with all of the rain is the weeds have taken over, and I've been doing a lot of other work that I haven't gotten to them, so you'll see lots of weeds today, and it's fine. That's just normal for gardens. Here is a variegated nasturtium I stuck the seeds in here when I knew all that rain was coming. Nasturtium seeds really like it quite wet to germinate. Sometimes I've had trouble in the past with germination on them. But if you soak the seeds, you can soak them overnight before you plant them if you're not going to be getting a lot of rain, and that can help. But if you know you got rain coming in, sticking those in the ground beforehand is a good idea. Here the Mexican oregano began blooming. Isn't that pretty? So man, I was not prepared for the squash to do this. Oh look, a little bee friend. Just doing his job, or hers more likely. I actually think I probably need to get some of these leaves off. Oh gosh. Okay, well, I missed one. Look at that. That's fine. It's still soft and edible, so that's nice. When they get real big, you kind of got to get creative with them. They're really good for making zucchini bread and like shredding up and things once they get real big, but I prefer to harvest them smaller because my favorite way to eat squash this time of year is just cut up with oil and salt and pepper and garlic and put on the Blackstone and grilled. I was trying to move these leaves out of the way though because I just noticed these are my blue butterfly peas coming up, and I don't want them competing for light and not being able to grow because gosh, the squash, it's doing the thing. I accidentally broke that one in the middle, so I just started to eat it. I personally think that like tender raw squash, as long as it's small, is so good, especially if you get them when they're like just a few inches. I'll just take those and cut them in half and throw them on a salad, or just alone, some little baby squash cut up in bite-sized pieces and then tossed with some sort of like vinaigrette dressing or just some olive oil and vinegar and salt and pepper. So tasty. Oh, I lost my coffee a row over. We'll go back. Here's the corn, growing quick. There's an adage that says that your corn should be knee-high by the 4th of July. I think that must have been for more northern growers because, well, obviously this isn't a raised bed, but this is well over knee-high if I were standing in the raised bed. And it's middle May. Well, I guess it's almost late May. It grows fast here. Here are the tomatillos. I mean, ferocious growth. This is 4 plants in about a 8-foot area. And it has filled them out. Ah, there you are. If you have something on a trellis and then you have something next to it that's really kind of aggressively pushing through, really getting your plants where they'll get up to where they can get the light. Like here, you know, sometimes I will like break off a couple of the leaves of a squash plant in a case like this. I'm just watching and making sure everybody can get the light that they need. And in cases like this, like these are so close to making it above the squash, and once this plant gets above the squash, you don't have to worry about it because it can photosynthesize. It's getting all that it needs. Oh, funny thing, guys, I noticed a potato growing over there, and then I noticed another potato growing here, and I put it in a vlog, and several people were like, hey, did those potatoes you were feeding the roly-polies sprout? And they did. That's what it is. I have random potatoes growing all over the place where I fed the roly-polies potatoes. That's hilarious. Obviously, I'm going to leave them and see what happens because I have to know. But like, that's just so funny. I was like, how did a potato get in there? And I put it in a vlog because I was like, I have no idea how a potato got in here. And people were like, you put them there. And they were sliced up, but some of them were sprouting. And I'm certain that's what it was. That the little, you know, though they ate the potato itself, the little eye had time to root and they're growing. I actually have some more space that needs to be planted with seedlings that just haven't taken off here. I have some garlic in the middle. I'm giving it a little bit more time because the bulbs are really small. I'm pulling scapes as they get them, and I'm trying to give it more time to bulb up, but it's dying back pretty hard. I just think this might not be the best garlic year for me. Here's a little bit more corn. There's just not much going on over here. These beds, oh my goodness, very, very full. Here's what's exciting me the most over here. These are more of those pro-cut sunflowers. So these are a low pollen variety that are designed for cutting so you can bring them in the house. And the low pollen thing is supposed to make them better for cut flowers. But I have the one section I showed you guys over there. I planted these first, so obviously they're closer, starting to open. But I was so happy to see their faces yesterday when they first started peeping open, and it looks like they'll probably be fully open here. That one by this evening. Yeah, isn't that wonderful? So I've been doing daily content this spring. So a lot of things you guys are getting to see a lot of updates on because I'm showing the garden throughout the week. Maybe more than I have in the last few years. But look at this. These are the sword beans. They're already to the top of the trellis. If you have watched the vlogs this week, you know that these plants are literally growing like 6+ inches a day. Absolutely bonkers. Very cool to see. I'm super excited about that. They haven't even set flowers yet, so we'll just see what happens. This may be one of those things that they become like a epic mess and take over, in which case I would love them all the more. Right down here, these are the rutabagas, and some of them are starting to get roots. They're just not large yet. This time of year can be difficult where I am for growing root vegetables because a lot of times they grow a lot of leaves, they don't root up, and then they straight go to seed. I think that these are gonna get enough roots for me to really enjoy them. They were on the smaller side. I'm just waiting and watching, but I'm looking for any sides of going to seed, because if they look like they're about to sprout, I'll go ahead and pull all of them and we'll just eat them small. But if I give them more time, obviously I'll get more food. Here's my next wave of squash. They're not producing any flowers or anything yet, but these are cocazel. It's about time for me to go ahead and plant some more squash somewhere else. I just try to have succession sown squash to get ahead of the squash bugs. Here, these are Armenian white cucumbers. I actually think these will produce longer. This spot enjoys the shade of the greenhouse in the morning and then the shade of the pavilion in the afternoon. So I think this is going to be a really ideal spot to grow them. Past this, I have some cinnamon basil, which makes a wonderful tea, and some more just like sweet basil, which pull these off. The cinnamon basil actually goes to seed and still tastes good, but for sweet basil I really like to make sure that I'm pruning it. This is thyme and it's blooming, but I think it's so pretty. This is actually lemon thyme and it smells really bright. I love using this when I'm like making like a lemon chicken noodle soup or chicken and rice soup with, like, I'll put lemon juice in it and some lemon zest, and I'll use this lemon thyme, and it's super bright. Or it's really nice in a compound butter with some lemon zest and Parmesan, or mixed into butter and cooked underneath the skin of a roasted chicken and then served with like a lemon, garlic, olive oil drizzle sauce. But yeah, it's really nice. All right, down here, this is where the volunteer sunflowers were. I've got more tomatoes, and these I've been kind of weaving through. I've tied up a couple. They weren't quite ready to be tied up, but it looks like they're starting to reach. And these I've stayed on top of pruning that I planted later. So they're all really pruned down to 1 main leader. So right here, my eggplants have the early blooms, also very spiky. Well, poke you. Interestingly, I planted this bed of eggplants first, and I'll show you some when we get down to the high tunnel. Like probably a solid 3 weeks later, I got a few more plants that were the same size these were when I planted them, and I planted them down in the high tunnel, and they're twice as big as these. I really just think nightshades appreciate shade cloth. I'm not sure. They are different varieties, so it could simply be just a very different plant shape. But I'm curious to see what the production looks like comparatively between these and those this year, and if the flavor's any different. I love having my tomato plants last longer, and the shade cloth really helps them to thrive. So I'll put some tomato plants in the high tunnel. The peppers do so much better in the high tunnel, but I don't think the tomatoes that are grown in the high tunnel taste as good as the ones that are grown out with more direct sunlight. Look at that beautiful zinnia. Oh, I wish I could remember what variety this is. I'm pretty sure this is one of the Aurora ones that are real big and kind of like a vintage tone. That's beautiful. All right, let's come this way. We got beautiful flowers opening up here in the garden bed. These are some pretty dahlias. The glads are opening. And I have some zinnias in here that I hope will fill this out. And my Jerusalem artichokes are also beginning to bloom. Here on this side, I was noticing this. This is kind of what I was talking about. These are radishes, and they're already starting to go to seed, even though they have not developed really any root to speak of. It's just getting a little warm for growing them. Radishes do develop these really cool seed pods, though. So if you're having a hard time growing radishes because it's getting too warm where you are, and they're starting to go to seed, let them go, and you'll get these neat seed pods. And if you harvest them young, they're super crunchy, and it's kind of like a really tiny, looks like a tiny little green bean, but it tastes like a radish. And so anywhere where you would use radishes, like on tacos or in a salad or as a garnish or something like that, you can use those seed pods interchangeably and still get food from these, even if it's not the food you intended to get. Obviously, you get a lot of those seed pods even off of one plant, so you don't necessarily need to let a lot of them go to seed. But if you're discouraged by that, all is not lost. Oh, this garden, what a wild mess. So fun, the stuff that pops back up. Like here's some dahlias, really pretty little happy things. There's some cosmos in here that have reseeded. And of course the roses in their splendor. It does get a little hard to navigate though. That's lemon balm. There's purple coneflowers. These hibiscus will bloom kind of later. They bloom kind of after everything else, but they're filling out now. This is, I think it's called Midnight Storm or Perfect Storm. It's a Proven Winners hibiscus, and it has the most beautiful pink blooms. They're huge, and it will be literally the entire thing will be covered. I love them. I've got about 5 of them in various places, but they are getting bigger and bigger every year, and I probably should have allotted them more space. So right here's my little mini mosquito fish pond. And I'm using pond very loosely, but there are mosquito fish in there, and they do eat mosquito larvae, so that's cool. Eventually what will happen is I'll see some babies in there, and I end up putting them in like our stock troughs and different things like that. Here, I told you guys earlier in the tours that this area stays really boggy, but I knew that the good things would essentially kind of choking out any of the weedy stuff, and that has happened. Like I've got a lot of chrysanthemums and lots of this purple coneflower, and then these are the Confederate roses, which this thing gets taller than the greenhouse. I've got 2 of them here, and they end up kind of like clouding out this whole space, and the stuff around the bottom fills in. Now it's where I want it to be. There's a lot of lemon balm popping up in here. That's reseeded a lot. There's another hibiscus, and of course the dwarf pear tree back there. I'm happy that this is at the state that it's at. I was a little concerned when I was having so much struggle with all the weeds and it was so wet, but it's good now. So there's not much to report in these beds other than the fact that I've got, you know, tomato plants growing that are really at the point of needing support. This is where we will put shade cloth. Our shade cloth last year got torn up by Helene, and at first we didn't even think it was that bad. We were like, it's okay, there were just some tears, but it very quickly just shredded after that. We took it down, and Maya was going to rework this. We actually have the shade cloth to repair it, to replace it. He was wanting to rework his like holding structure to make it tighter. We use 50% shade cloth. We get it from Grower Solutions, and it makes a world of difference growing in a very hot place. When like July comes, a lot of the garden that's out and not under some sort of cover or doesn't get shade at some point during the day, it more or less just kind of fries. It just turns to a crisp. Now, this is why like I have a big pavilion in the middle of my garden. You know, for people who live in really short seasons or have less sun and UV throughout the day, you might not be able to do that without it having some sort of consequence. Full sun is 6 hours a day. If you're getting full undappled, like direct sunlight 6 hours a day, that's considered a full sun garden. And you got to think, like there are areas out here that they're getting 14 hours of direct sun a day, and it's up and pretty hot by 7:30 in the morning, and by the afternoon it's just absolutely baking. Pretty much the whole garden by the afternoon in the summer is just drooping, even if it's well watered, even if it's healthy, and I'd be drooping too. It's hot. So the shade helps here. The shade cloth really helps here, and that 50% UV blockage, especially my nightshades, they just completely thrive under there. It's a season extension thing. You know, like I can grow cucumbers a little later underneath shade cloth. I can grow the things that would quickly go to seed underneath shade cloth. I've got more root vegetables and stuff like that in my high tunnels right now, and I'm actually planting out some more beets just to see how late they'll go, because I'm just really trying to get a grasp for fresh eating, those limits that I can push here in our garden. So Maya finished the berry beds this week, and I'm pretty sure moving over here is next on his list. And of course right here in the middle is where we're going to be putting like a chicken coop and permanent yard in. Right here is the early stages of our perennial, I don't know what to call this, I guess perennial garden, because we have the asparagus, we have the berries, and then down on this side going this way, kind of paralleling that, is going to be muscadines. And my hope is in the future to do like a really cool pergola down the middle here. I think that I've settled on planting the Lady Banks rose on that, and then essentially being able in this 12-foot middle, being able to do like a big outdoor table and and host things. I'm very excited for this, but we went ahead and rushed. The irrigation's not on yet. We still have to do the whole rest of the system, but Maya laid the groundwork for that just so this could be done. But we needed to get the berries in before it got too hot to be planting berries. We moved several, like here. These are the ones that were moved from other parts of the garden, and they look really good. I have been watering them regularly to, you know, make sure they don't struggle, but I'm very pleased that those are not shocking or anything like that. I have more berries to move from other places of the farm, but I'm waiting. The blueberries we went ahead and moved because they were just on the smaller side, and we were able to really get up underneath them and get a lot of their root system, but some of my plants are like quite large, so I don't know. We may wait until they go more into dormancy. There's the asparagus bed, which I have quit harvesting this. Obviously, I mean, it's grown up. With asparagus, which I can show you this, they come up. There's a stalk, as you're used to seeing it. And you just cut these off at the soil, and they're delicious. And I could still pick some of them. Basically, they say you can pick it until they start coming up the width of a pencil, and once they're pencil size, you need to let them go ahead and go to seed, because if you just keep picking them, the root system will eventually run out of energy and stop trying to grow. But once you've got asparagus, you're always going to have asparagus. We moved these beds this year and scooped up all the soil, moved it over here. Maya rebuilt around it. I still harvested a lot, but I could tell that, you know, that definitely set them back versus how they were producing last year. So next year will probably be a great asparagus year, but this year I decided to go ahead and let them get more established before I took too much. My memory card always runs out on garden tours in the exact same area right here in the middle. I guess my pacing stays the same. I actually remembered and brought another card today, so we could have a nice long video. So the in-ground garden is making some progress. All the potatoes are obviously up, you can see. With these have a really thick layer of mulch down, but you know, I always check to make sure that no potato is showing. I'll mulch it more heavily. You want to keep those fully covered. If they grow with the sunlight hitting them, they'll turn green, and it produces a chemical that can cause stomach upset. So you want to make sure you keep your potatoes well mulched and covered. In this row, there's a little bit of overlap here, but the rest here, these are all Orange Glow watermelons, my absolute favorite watermelon, and they've all just sprouted this last few days after all the rain. The walkways, we're just going to be weed eating these. Maya got here on the sides yesterday, but plan on just going down the middle and keeping that low. You know, eventually, like those watermelons spreading everywhere, the pumpkins growing everywhere, that will suppress the weeds in the walkways to a certain degree, just because shading it from light. If I could get my hands on some wood chips, like really fresh wood chips, I would lay a thick layer of those down. That's just sometimes kind of hard to come by when you live out in the middle of nowhere. If you're not in the middle of nowhere, there is a service. It's called Chip Drop. I've tried to use it. I've actually never gotten a chip drop before, but I know a lot of people do, especially if you live in the path between a tree service and wherever it is they dump their chips. They will gladly bring them to your house. Chip drop gives you the option of, I think, paying like 20 bucks or something like that to like cover costs of driving to your house. But the only chips I've ever gotten is when I actually call tree services and say, hey, I saw you guys work in my area. Here's my address. If you need a place to dump, I would love any chips you have. And I have gotten chips from that. I think I could probably use about 10 trailer loads of wood chips, just mulching the heck out of all the places that I don't want stuff to grow. And eventually it would just break down and be soil, and then stuff would grow there again. But check out the growth of my pumpkins. I'm pretty sure in the last tour, we were still waiting for these to come up. And now look at them. They will take off like crazy and fill the space up. So I've got everything set up here. My mom is actually here for graduation this weekend. My son Asher is graduating. By the time you guys see this video, he will be a high school graduate. And I think we're going to try to harvest the onions later today. So we've got this set out, and I was using this to make sure it was going to work. You got to cure onions for 2 weeks or so. You want a cool, preferably shaded, well ventilated place. This is the only thing I have that even closely hits that. Obviously it's not cool, but it's cooler than a lot of the other places I have. And this works. I've cured my onions in the high tunnel multiple times before, and it's what I've got. So with that, I'll just put all of the onions on here where they have space in between them so that there is airflow. And after a couple weeks, once the outsides are nice and papery, I can take them, braid them, and put them in our our pantry building for storage. Speaking of beets in the high tunnel, here is my latest planting of beets. They don't have much of a root, but they are getting one, which is better than the stuff that's growing out in full sun. And here are some really lovely Ragged Jack kales. I ran inside for a minute, and it turned into an hour because my kids were waking up. We're gonna finish this garden tour now. I know it was just a moment for you, but you know, my kale is still rocking and rolling. It doesn't taste nearly as good as it did. It was, you know, really crisp and fresh and kind of sweet. It's getting a little stringy. It's getting a little more pungent. I'm still using it, not as much as I was because it's not as enjoyable, but I'm gonna keep going with it and juicing it especially until it's not there anymore. This looks super full, but like if you look, the bottom of all of these is harvested. Here the dill is going to seed. Yesterday, oh yeah, he's still hanging out. I saw the first swallowtail caterpillar. So that is the caterpillar of a swallowtail butterfly. Dill and fennel are the host plants for that. And so when they come, I always let them have it. Because I love having the butterflies in the garden. Celery, still going. I was really nervous with the celery that it wasn't gonna produce, but it looks pretty okay, so we're just gonna keep going and hope it gets bigger. I pulled everything off of these were peas, and they, you know, were struggling with the heat. I think I'm gonna use these two arches in here and try to grow some more later cucumbers and just see how they do. It may still be too hot for them, but I figured we could give it a try. Out here I have these artichoke plants. They're getting big. Those will probably start forming some buds here pretty soon, which I'm thrilled with how this is working out. And also the carrots in here are getting to be pretty good size. Pull one and I'll show you. Alright, so these are Danvers. That one's kind of stumpy. See if they're all like that. Oh, that's more what I was expecting. Alright, so yeah, really good sized carrots. No signs of these going to seed yet, so as long as they're fine, I'm gonna leave them in the ground and just harvest as I need them. Between this planting and the other planting I have in the other high tunnel, I have a lot of carrots right now, so I'm definitely like thinking of ways to use them in things. I didn't bring a harvest basket today, so all these things I'm picking, I'm just throwing in here. Pretty much done with the strawberries. I do have random volunteer chamomiles popping up everywhere, and I definitely leave them because though this is not a lot, you know, I can pick it, make a cup of tea here and there. Chamomile is one of my favorite smells, really of all, but especially in the garden. Even though mostly the strawberries are gone, there are a few good ones here and there. As the season progresses, they're really not nearly as sweet. I say that, and that is one delicious strawberry. So even though they're fewer now, they're still really good. I picked several of the artichokes off of this plant. At this point, I'm just gonna let them bloom. When you're picking all the big ones and then they start sending up a whole bunch of small ones, at that point it's like, okay, the plant's kind of running out of its energy. Here I've got another artichoke plant that's starting to form some chokes. Here's my one really great blueberry plant. This has been in a lot of vlogs recently because I stop by here every single time I'm in the garden because these blueberries are delicious. My mom was talking about how her blueberry plants are really producing a lot and how she's been eating blueberries for breakfast every morning in the last 2 weeks in Arkansas. And we were just discussing how berries are so worth the investment of time. It was funny because I just made a video talking about that. I don't know if y'all will have seen that by the time this comes up. It'll be, if it wasn't up the day before this, it'll be up the day after. I've been shooting a lot of content getting ready for graduation weekend. I just had no clue how really worthwhile it was to get berries established. And I kind of planted some in Arkansas. I did have, you know, a couple of places, and we didn't really get to harvest a lot until like the year we left. And so when I came here, it was a higher priority. And of course now we're really prioritizing it, getting that whole middle garden area established. But like, man, these strawberries are relatively hands-off. I mean, keeping them weeded, feeding them with some compost tea, and weed eating around them and all that stuff. And then once the year progresses and, you know, towards the end of the summer, we will cut the strawberries back a lot. We'll basically essentially just weed eat them down. But yeah, like really comparatively to like having to prune and tie up tomatoes and, you know, really fight the pest pressure, berries have been a pretty hands-off growing experience for me. And I just want more of them, because berries are expensive to purchase at the store. They're just, what you get at home is just incomparable in flavor to what you're buying at the store. It's so much better. I'm like becoming the berry hype girl because I'm loving having them so much. Watch me step in my beds. Do as I say, not as I do. I walk in my garden beds all the time. People are like, you're not supposed to do that. And I'm like, I know, I say that too. And to be fair, it hasn't stopped the garden from growing yet. All right, so this has actually been the place of most of my work the last few days. And doesn't it look nice in here? I think it looks very nice in here. I pulled these beets out and forgot to carry them in yesterday. A lot of these beets had gone to seed and they actually went to the animals. But these are actually still usable, so I'll carry those in. And I'm going to just finally cut and freeze my rhubarb. I was trying to let it get as big as possible. I hope the flavor's still good. Of course, I'm going to cook it with strawberries and probably sugar. I think I'll probably freeze a lot of this rhubarb. I was told that was a good thing to do. I'm loving the calla lilies. These growing together was a bit of a mistake, and I'm going to need to move them because these were planted a year after those, and those are so much bigger, and so these are going to get bigger, but they're fine now. I'll cut the rhubarb back. It'll die back and stop growing as it's getting warm. These will fill out, and then when it all goes into dormancy, I'll remember what's where and dig them up. But aren't these incredible? And they last so long cut. Maya got me this little planter for Mother's Day, and he'd gone to the florist and they were like giving him different cut flower arrangements, and he was like, do you have anything in soil? My wife is a gardener, and so it's one of those little planters that's got like a whole bunch of plants in it. If you ever get those, if somebody ever gives you like an arrangement or a gift that's a planter that's got like 5 different plants in it, separate those dudes out. They're really not meant to grow long term in a planter like that. But one of the things that was in that planter was a calla lily, and I mean, it's like this big around. It's got a couple little flowers, but I know that if I put it in soil, it's going to grow perennial year after year, and I'm going to get to cut lots and lots of flowers over it. So I'm going to move it out, and I'm actually probably just going to put it in this tunnel. I know I'm not trying to do a ton of cut flowers in here, but it's obviously working well. Like, look at this one, another calla lily that I cut 8 blooms off of this week and brought them in the house, and there are several more flowers setting. This is one, well, this started as 3 plants. Now, of course, they spread. But look at that. That's amazing. And I'm fine leaving that here. So I may put that other one that I got just in the greenhouse somewhere, because there's plenty of space for the food. And that is definitely worth growing something that lovely. I do have some dahlias that are coming up. There's a bunch here, there's one there, and there's some down there. This is when I was trying to do cut flowers in here, and we moved most of them out. But if you leave just a tiny bit of a dahlia tuber, they'll take off. Another dahlia. These are beets. So my peppers were really small. I had a bunch of peppers, and I honestly just had them sown too thickly, and I should have separated them. And then it got to the point that it was like, well, at this point, if I separate them into pots, that's just another step that's unnecessary. I could just put them out. So they have grown and greened up a lot just since being out here. I'm not concerned about them at all. Even the really small ones like these, they've gotten twice as big since we put them out. Yeah, this will fill out. It will be later in the season that I'm harvesting peppers, but that's fine. I do have some earlier ones here that I planted from started plants, and I mean, you see how fast they've grown. And they're starting to really set fruit. Like, here's a bell pepper. I've harvested about 6 of the banana peppers, Here's my other planting of carrots. You want to see how these are? Let's see. Oh goodness. Well, now I gotta get that one out because I just got the greens off of it. So this is, I think, I want to say this was Kurodu. What's that the name of this carrot? It's just like a reddish orange. They're really about the same size as those Danvers, even though the Danvers were planted after. And that can be because variety. Let's see, here I've got quite a few growing next to each other. Pretty good size. I can get so carried away and pull every carrot out of this bed because I'm so excited. I love harvesting underground things. I'm just gonna get a few more. And that one was close together, so it's smaller. Aren't those great? When I think about the things that give me the most joy in the garden, eating snacks, coming out and just eating things fresh out of my garden. I love coming out and getting what I'm gonna go directly in my house and cook. Like whenever I'm making dinner and I just bring a basket out and just go through and grab ingredients and then go back in the house and cook them. That is something that even over a decade into growing my own food, the novelty of that still not worn off. And harvesting things that were underground, where it's like the thrill of like, what's it gonna be? You pull it out. It makes me so happy. That is my garden for our third week. It's definitely keeping me busy. There's a lot going on. There's so much change week to week. And the truth is, where I live, I get to harvest food year round. You know, over the winter, I was harvesting brassicas and cool weather things and roots. And then we come into, you know, the very late winter, early spring, and I'm getting lots of asparagus and the finishing of the winter garden. And then the strawberries really start coming on, and now it's the blueberries and the raspberries, and got the first few ripe blackberries this week. And of course now we're still harvesting the finishing of the cool weather garden. I've harvested lots of cabbage and kale, lots of roots, beets, carrots, radishes. And as this begins to wind down, we'll get into full swing of tomatoes and cucumbers and melons and peppers and the corn and the squash. We're getting a lot of squash right now too. So yeah, we're steadily in the harvest. I wouldn't call this the peak by any means. For me, the peak is when I'm coming out and bringing in 5-gallon buckets worth of tomatoes, and I can cover my entire kitchen table in produce that has to be processed. That's the peak garden, and that's when it's a lot of work. But there's definitely a lot to eat in the garden right now, which is great because I love eating food out of the garden. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today and spending this time walking through my garden with me. I'm in the middle of posting daily vlogs between Roots and Refuge and the Farmer's Table right now. So if you want to check out those channels, and make sure you're subscribed to them so you can be notified of new videos. There are a lot of them right now. And I will see you guys in the next garden tour. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I bless you. Until next time.